I just recently got a text from my 52-year-old son, so I'll read it to you. It said, "Mom, I was on Facebook and I saw you bought another BMW motorcycle. What are you thinking? You're 76 years old. When will this stop?" I text him back, "Son, I'm shocked and amazed. I'm 76 years old?" You're too late. I just booked October 2025, a 15-day motorcycle tour through Spain and Portugal. Badass mom. We forget how blessed we are to be able to age. And today I want to upend the aging narrative, upend it and share with you several things. First of all, you can flip the script on aging. You can infuse your body with new energy. And I'm going to show you and share with you today how to do that. And the other thing is, today's about igniting your inner badass. And I'm going to show you how to do that as well. The day started like any other day. I'd walked 4 miles with my walking group, and then I was having a contractor come to give me a tile quote. And he came in, and I said, "You know, I can't remember who referred you to me." And he pulled out his phone, and we looked at the text together, and it said, "Manuel, please give this woman a fair tile quote. She's in my real estate investment group. She's an old white woman." You know, since I've left the business world, that really hit deep inside my heart. You know, it was kind of like a real pain point, because I had so much wisdom, like all of you in the room have so much inner wisdom, and yet it feels like it's discounted when we retire, and then we just become an old white woman, you know. And I carried that with me all day. It was really painful. And I went back, after he left, I went back into the bedroom because I was packing for a 1,000-mile motorcycle trip to join my son in Colorado to celebrate his 50th birthday. And that night I went to sleep, and when I woke up, I thought it was pretty funny. And I heard the tune of Alicia Keys, "This Girl Is on Fire." And I sat down and started to write. The reason I'm mentioning this to you is sometimes when somebody insults us or something rubs us wrong, it could be the catalyst to turn your life around. And look what happened. Now I do more than just do my walks. I go all over the country and I give talks, and I just spoke at the National BMW Rally. There was over 5,000 in attendance in Redmond, Oregon, and I rode there. I think what my son doesn't realize is there's a joy to riding that we don't have very often in our life today. When you think about it, it's a community of people that love to ride motorcycles, but more than that, they feel totally alive and vibrant when they're riding. And there's actually a motorcycle kind of initiation or club. When you pass a motorcycle, I don't care if they're a Harley rider with a bandana and tattoos, and they got their bandana on, and they're riding one of those crotch, rockets that's way up here. They all do the motorcycle wave. It's like a connection, a deep connection that's very difficult to find as you retire and find your little groups of people. You need your groups to connect with. And this is just an automatic connection. You can go anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, and they'll do this motorcycle wave. And it's different, some just go, or some will flick a finger, or some will do the full wave, but it always happens. And then they have another thing that they do, which is kind of cool. They'll go like this. cop with radar. So they not only connect with you, but they look out for you. How exciting is that? We have millions and millions of cells in our body, and they have a voltage. Each cell has a voltage, and the inside of the cell has a negative charge, and the outside has a positive charge, and and you can actually measure that charge. It's 1.4, and they have a voltmeter that you can actually check the voltage of each cell. And I have a friend, he's a doctor, and he uses that voltmeter to check his energy. And he says, I can kind of guess how long I'm going to live on how high that voltage is. Think about it. There's 3 things that will affect that cell. The first one is toxins. It'll affect it in a negative way. The second one is thoughts. And the third is emotions. And it can create a lower frequency. What creates that lower frequency is many times fear and resistance. And I talk a lot with my clients about how fears take us over and we move into resistance. And anytime you're in resistance, you're not in present moment. So you miss the opportunity of being with that person or doing something where you're like the motorcyclist, where you have to be 100% focused at all time. Think about it. Doing 70 on an Autobahn in Germany and it's raining, been there. If you go like, oh, what's that over there? No, you have to be 100% present and focused. And that's rare because we spend so much time in resistance or diving into our fears. Actually, fears can be a good thing. I want to take you down memory lane. So I was in my mid-20s in the 70s. And I was married to a traveling salesman, and the stories are true. I ended up getting a divorce with an 18-month-old son and no career training. And I answered an ad, and I went on the appointment, and he said, it's life insurance. And I thought, oh my God, I'll stay till I can find a real job. And I got into the business market, so I called on business owners. So the first 2 years, knocked on doors calling on business owners. But I was so afraid that they would find out I really didn't know that much about business insurance. So it was my greatest fear and became my greatest success. And do you know why? Because when I walked in and introduced myself, I would say to them, how in the world did you get into the plumbing and heating business? And 20 minutes later, they'd stop talking. That's called psychological reciprocity. It's a big word, but what it means is when you give someone the privilege of totally listening to them. You're not thinking about what you're going to say next. You're not want to interrupt because you went on that trip and you want to share that information. But when you give 100% focus to someone, then they're honor bound to do the same to you. So I learned through my fear that my greatest success was listening, active listening. The insurance industry didn't like women in their industry. There was maybe 3% when I got into the business. And I remember going to my first luncheon. I was kind of excited. I was registering for the meeting after the luncheon, and I felt a man tap me on the shoulder. I turned and looked down, and he said, I don't think women should be in the insurance business. And I snapped, neither should short little fat men. I guess what people didn't realize back then, women had very few opportunities, and I didn't have a back door. What I mean was, this was the career I had chosen, and this was the career I was going to be a success in. But it was difficult, and it was hard, and I had a long ways to go. About my 8th year, I was with Lincoln National Life. Back then, you were a captive agent, so that meant you sold all the products for that one company. And about the 8th year, I got called into my manager's office, and he said, "Mary Lou, sit down." I sat down. He said, "This is 75th anniversary for Lincoln National Life, and every year in September, they have a sales contest." And he said, "You beat out 4,000 other agents and won the sales contest." And not only that, he said, "They want you to speak in Hawaii at their 75th celebration as a keynote speaker." I said, okay, I'm pretty excited about that. They flew me back to Fort Wayne, Indiana twice, and then they sit in the conference room and say, "Can we help you write your speech?" And I go, "No, I think I got it." Then I'd leave. And so I arrived at the celebration, and it was huge lights on the stage. They were so bright, I couldn't even see the audience of 700-800 agents, mostly men. And I closed with this poem. I said, "They talk about a woman's place as though we have a limit, and yet there's not a place in heaven or earth without a woman in it." So I left the stage, kind of blinded, and I walked around, and I came to the front, and there was 700 people giving me a standing ovation. It was pretty cool. You know, we don't get validated very often in our life, and I felt validated. And so I went back, and I was ready to dial for dollars again, make it happen for another year. And an associate came, and he stood by the door. He didn't come in, but he stood by the door, and he crossed his arms, and he goes, "You know, Mary Lou, didn't take quite as much in sales to win this year." You know, he did me a favor because I worked even harder. And there'll always be someone in your life that wants to keep you small. I call it a root-bound mentality. It's the sticky feeling of being stuck when you're around them, right? Have you ever gone to lunch with someone you haven't seen for a long time, and you're up, you showered, you got clean, you arrived, you're looking forward to it, and all they do is tell you their troubles and their problems. And you leave, you're walking out to the parking lot like a snail on Valium, right? They've just sucked all the energy out of you. Where does that energy go, and how do you get it back? And that's what I want to talk to you about today. We have an excess of energy, but we have to create an energy highway. I've been gone about 5 years from the corporate world, but just before I left, I won an opportunity, well, not one, I was invited to an opportunity. It was an educational symposium in Huntington Beach at the Hyatt Regency, and it was the top insurance agents in the country, about 500-600. And when I saw who was the keynote speaker, I arrived early that morning because it was Magic Johnson. And he got his name because in high school, he just never missed a basket. He was just a great basketball player. So I got up, got in the auditorium early, and I sat right in the front row. Oh my gosh, a big, long introduction. He came out, stood, big, long introduction, and then a standing ovation before he even started. And then he started to walk across this vast stage. He got to the edge of it, he looked down at me and said, "What's your name?" Honest, I didn't remember. I mean, I was like, "What's my name?" "Come up here," he says. I went up on stage, he enveloped me into a big hug, and he said, "All the magic starts when you show up." And look at you today. You showed up, right? So showing up and being visible is when the magic can happen. When I left Lincoln National and went to work for Wells Fargo Bank, I ran their executive benefits department. And about the 4th year in, they just kept giving me West Texas and New Mexico, and I was kind of burning out. And I set the intention. You know how they say if you set an intention, something will show up? I said, I'd like to have more fun in my life. And I worked through the next lunch. And I went down to the kitchen to get some soup, and I brought it back, and I'd forgotten a spoon. So I went into the kitchen to grab a spoon, and I looked down, and on the table was a newspaper, and there was a block ad, and it said, motorcycle for sale. I picked it up. I don't even know what made me pick it up. I picked it up and took it to my desk and dialed and called, and I said to my assistant, you want to go for a ride? And we looked at the motorcycle. I didn't know what it was. It was a Harley, an 883 Sportster, but I did not know that at the time. But I looked at it, and you know what I said? That looks like fun. They brought it on Saturday, and I hadn't been on a motorcycle for about 50 years. So I said, I think I should take it for a ride. I got on it, went around the neighborhood a couple of times, came back into the garage, took my hand off the clutch in first gear, and it threw me on the cement floor, right on top of me. They were like, are you gonna buy it? I brushed my pants off and said, yes, I am. I started riding up Rio Grande, then Corrales, and then all over the world. I've done 7 international motorcycle tours, and I'm still having fun. Yeah. What gets in our way? Fear and resistance. The fears take us over. The resistance moves us out of present time. I left Wells Fargo and I was going to start my own company, but I had signed a non-compete clause, so I couldn't call on any of my clients for a year. And just about that time, 2 of my friends were invited to a presentation on a trip to Africa. And I went, and I was excited. I was like, I'd never done anything like that. And then they said the price of the trip, and I was like, what? My fear escalated. I went, oh, you guys go. Have fun. I'll just stay home. So I didn't sign up. But the thing is, your 2 friends start talking about the trip. Well, we got to buy a 21-pound piece of luggage, and we got to get all our shots. And I'm like, hello, I'm sitting here. And finally, the desire to go became greater than the fear, and I said, I'm going. Well, the airfare had gone up. Trip cost a little more, and I went. I had the trip of a lifetime. While we were there, we were in a camp called Old Mandora. It was on the lower Zambezi River, and they had to split the group up because it was a very small camp. And we were introduced to the area with the people that were in the camp, and she said, we have a very unusual thing here. We have a hippo. His name is Norman. And he comes out at night. He doesn't feed at night like you normally would. And he's been kicked out of a pod because only 1 male hippo in a pod. And he said he comes out of the river at night, waddles through the camp, and plops down where we live. And we're like, oh, it's so not true. Because more people are killed from hippos on the river than any other animal. So it got dusk, and we heard plop, plop, coming through the water. And here comes Norman. And we safely behind with our flashlights, we're following him. And he's just plopping along. And he plops down next to their camp. Now, what makes people change their behavior so drastically? What did he need? He needed connection, right? He changed his whole behavior. He didn't graze at night. He gave up a bit of who he was for connection. And how many of us do that? We give up a piece of ourselves to stay connected to sometimes people who really want us to stay small and fit in. They don't want us to be big and shine and be vibrant and alive. Something to think about. But here's the other part of that story. I went back and I had the biggest year ever. I remodeled my kitchen, I put on a new roof, I made a lot of money. And what happens when you push past the fear is you create a bigger pot to live in. It expands, and you invite more in. That's what happens when you move past the fear and let go of the resistance. If you want to see something really shocking, there's a documentary on 2020 about a Dr. Sarno, and he's board certified, and he worked in pain management, or pain period, like how do you get rid of pain? And it was introduced by Barbara Walters, and the commentator also suffered from lower back pain. And I'm going to read to you what Dr. Sarno says about lower back pain. Dr. Sarno strongly believes back pain does not result from structural flaws, but suppressed rage, life conflicts, unrealized dreams, childhood traumas, and uncontrolled stressors that persistently upset the brain, creating a fight or flight response. This theory is that an upset brain turns on the sympathetic nervous system. The blood flows to the muscles and nerves and reduce, causing mild oxygen deprivation. This results in lower back pain. Once the parasympathetic nervous system is restored, the calmness allows the pain to disappear. Now, do you believe that? Yes. It's possible, right? I was very skeptic. Watching the video, he spends 3 hours and he convinces these people that this is what's happening, and the commentator's pain went away. I have my own experience. I was married to someone who had suppressed rage, and it would blow up at any time for anything. And I spent 6 years with him. And in the 5th year, I got up one morning and I couldn't get out of bed. I had lower back pain, really, really bad. And it was excruciating. And you know, you can't really believe this is made up, right? Because it's real pain. And we went to get MRIs, and we did all the different things, chiropractic, and I tried everything, and it didn't go away. And then I was at a training, and I took the afternoon off to get a massage. And I love my massage lady. I love a firm massage. So I said I want a deep tissue massage. I got on the table, and all I could feel was occasional light fingers going over my body, sometimes just movement like this, and I was like, I'm not giving her a tip. The whole hour, this smooth movement of her hands. She finished, I got up, threw my legs over the table to stand, and my pain was gone. She got a big tip. So we really don't know how to explain how this works, do we? But when you go back to the cell, and you think there are three things that can change that cell: toxins, thoughts, and emotions. And what happens is that frequency, that charge, starts to diminish. And maybe that's what happens when we start to age. We lose our light. We lose our energy. Is there any young people in the room? Did you get past security? Let me explain what's happened. The reason I'm asking if there's any young people in the room is I'm thinking of the wall phone. Think about it. Remember the wall phone when you were growing up, the dial? And well, we had one line and we shared it with a lot of people. And you remember what that was called? The party line, right? And not only that, they loved knowing what was going on in your life. And that was called rubbernecking. They're like listening in to your conversations. Well, I'm using this as an analogy because when you stop and think about, we have two brains. We have a gut brain. And that communicates with our other brain, and it's and it produces serotonin, which comes up into the vagus nerve, and then it produces melatonin. I call them Sarah and Mel, just so I can remember. They're supposed to be communicating, right? They're supposed to be doing a great job regulating our heart's pressure, our blood pressure, sending calming thoughts up into our brain. So the question is, how's it working? We have gut issues, right? Gluten intolerant, high blood pressure. We can't sleep at night. My belief is that we've got a party line and there's a lot of people on it. And when we're trying to make a communication from one brain to the other, there's a distortion. Isn't that what happens when a lot of people on one line? There's a distortion, right? And static. And we don't get the message. And so it creates havoc with our body. I'm just using that as an analogy. I think it's a pretty good one, actually. When you think about it, we want to get the party line off the line, right? And you can do that with something called thought-filled therapy. It was developed by Dr. Roger Callahan, and he was a psychologist in Beverly Hills, and he had a thriving practice, but no one ever left. You know, they loved coming to him and telling him about their problems. And he started experimenting with different modalities and tapping and eye movement and different things. And he had a lady who had phobias, couldn't be near water. And he did a tapping sequence, and she wasn't afraid of water anymore. And he says, man, I'm really onto something here. And it's been around for about 35 years. I'm certified in thought-filled therapy and the emotion code to release old emotions that cling to those cells. What did I say, the three? Toxins, thoughts, and emotions, right? That draw that energy down, that 1.4 drops, and then our frequency is less. And then we invite in what? Dis-ease, or maybe disease. I mean, the lower the frequency. When you think of if you were going to measure words, what would the word from 1 to 10, rage or anger, be? Yeah, probably a 1 or 2. It's a low vibrational frequency. And yet, if you use the word joy or abundance, what would the frequency be? So you can see how powerful our words are. And I always used to say, I love sales. I was good at it. I used to say, I'm going to dial for dollars. And I'd say, I'm a magnet for money. Those were my two sayings. I'm a magnet for money. And I did so well. Chapter 10 is potholes, sinkholes, and assholes. Assholes. Potholes, everybody, that's a pothole. We can move through that with ease pretty much. I remember a friend was coming over to pick me and my son up for lunch, and I guess she looked down to text me that she was there, and she ran into my garage door. That's a pothole. Just no big deal, and I got a new garage door. That's how I looked at it. A sinkhole is a lot more difficult, right? When you think about it, it could be a family crisis or a health crisis, and we need help when we're in a sinkhole. We need support and encouragement and people around us who really care about us. And then you have to build a foundation to get out of it, right? You have to have support, a good foundation to climb out of a sinkhole. I've actually been an asshole. I was in a class. It was called Course in Miracles. So I'm just saying that I was trying to create miracles in my life and be non-judgment and forgiving. So I left the class, and I had an afternoon appointment, but I had to stop by the post office. And there was a new postal lady, and there was a big long line, and she was the only one. And she was kind of bossy. She was chewing people out like, hey, get behind the line. And, hey, you didn't fill out that form. Go back, fill out the form. And I'm standing there going, what a... tapping my foot, irritated. And about that time, the door opened, and a woman stuck her head in, and she goes to the postal lady, have you heard from social services? And she went like that, and the lady left. So when I walked up, I said, are you adopting? And she looked up, and she said, my grandchildren. Whew. I can still feel that today. There was a miracle right there, right? A deep connection. So we finished, and she looked up and she said, do I know you? And I go, you do now. So we never know. When we're in judgment, we create resistance. When we're in judgment, we create separation. I'm going to close with a story. There was a couple, and they'd been married for 25 years. And she had 2 teenage sons, and she hated all the noise. Something was always on, the TV, the music. So her husband says to her, honey, what would you like for our 25th anniversary? And she said, a quiet evening alone. Because he loved her so much, he got her a room over by the airport at the Sheraton. And she checked in, and she had room service brought up, and she had a really good book with her, so she read the book and got sleepy, and finally she went to sleep. So she was asleep for about 10 minutes, and a 747 took off. Knocked her out of bed, onto the floor. She couldn't believe it. She got back up, got into bed, took a few minutes. She finally got to sleep. Another 747 took off. Knocked her out of bed. She'd had it. What did she come for? A quiet evening. So she went to the phone and called the night manager, and he said, I'll be right up. So he came in. He said, ma'am, nothing like that has ever happened here. Let me see if it happens to me. So he got in the bed, and about that time, there was a knock on the door. She goes to the door and opens it, and there's her husband. And he says, I knew you didn't mean you didn't want me. And his eye went over her shoulder, and he saw the night manager in the bed with the covers up like this. And the night manager said, I know you're not going to believe this, but I'm waiting for a plane. Are you waiting for a plane? Are you waiting for the magic to happen? I'm suggesting that you ignite your inner badass and put on your big girl panties and go out in a blaze of fire. Thank you.